Oh, the sweet sound of the new intro. Welcome back, Cover One, the draft podcast. CP, my man, happy Friday to you, my brother. How are we?
Happy Friday. Yep, glad to be talking football and getting away. We were just talking about in our pre-production meeting there, getting away from maybe some of politics. We know it's important, but heck, let's get back to some football and relieve our minds a little bit this weekend.
Yes, let's decompress a little bit, take away some of the stress of potential, voter fraud if you're into that thing or whatever it might be. But it's been a crazy couple of days, obviously, with the election, and we're all kind of on pins and needles of who's going to be announced as the next president of the United States for at least the next 4 years. But obviously, we'll see what happens over the weekend. I'm assuming we'll get an announcement maybe tonight, maybe over the weekend. But as we were saying before the show, let's hope it doesn't take over too much of the football weekend, because we've got a great weekend set for college football, and there's going to be a ton of draft prospects to really pay attention to. And I mean, you had it last night with some of the Mountain West: Colorado State, Wyoming, Utah State, Nevada. Fun fact about Colorado State: my high school quarterback, my little league quarterback, the guy that I played with my entire life in football, is actually an offensive assistant for the Colorado State Rams. So fun little fact there. So I was definitely rooting for them last night. I haven't seen him on TV yet, but that'll be pretty cool. He played at Grand Valley State. Just some fun facts there, but he was actually pretty good there. But tonight, some games start. Miami at NC State, BYU at Boise State at 9:45 p.m. Eastern. That's the big game tonight, without question. It definitely, don't want to take away from Miami and NC State, but the big game is BYU Boise State tonight, simply because of Zach Wilson, who we talked about quite a bit last week. We'll obviously talk about him a little bit here today, and a couple of other players for Boise State. But any expectations for tonight? Anybody that you're looking out for?
I mean, maybe if people, I guess I'll talk on behalf of maybe a lot of just draft experts and fans across the country, but seeing Zach Wilson really being put up against the test of the strength of a Boise State team. And even though, sure, they're not the top 5, top 10 Boise State of old, but still the name recognition and the talent that we know that they bring in over there in Idaho, this will be something that we can actually see maybe Wilson take that next step forward against maybe stiffer competition. And I'm not that guy that's going to sit there and degrade him for playing against lower competition, because, I mean, the guy's put outstanding numbers. I mean, regardless of who he's playing, he's done everything you would want a elite tier quarterback to do against some of that lesser competition. So tonight, you get him in a primetime spot, and I think a lot more people are really going to fall in love and just see the potential of Wilson. And I know that's the easy answer of guys to watch, but I think that's maybe one of the more important prospects to watch this weekend, not just on Friday, but across Saturday as well.
No doubt about it. We've always talked about it as who's that QB3. I mean, I think Wilson, you could pencil him in at this point, like we talked about last week. And, he's up to almost 75% completion percentage on the year. And he had a throw last week that, I mean, it was an absolute dime. It was dropped by his wide receiver, but he had two defenders draped over the receiver, and he put this thing in the bucket. I mean, it was insane of how he was able to step up in the pocket and make this somewhat throw on the run. But it just, his ability to really process and just the way he energizes this BYU team, it's really interesting. But you bring up a good point. Boise State is no slouch by any means. They're ranked 21st in the country, and I know the rankings this year are all over the place just simply because of COVID, but Boise State, they have some players. And I mean, Riley Wimpy is probably their best player overall on defense, and he's got a sack already this year through 2 games, 14 tackles, but he's a senior linebacker at 6'1", 233. He's a veteran guy. He had over 80 tackles last year, some decent range, and he's just really good within his run fits, and I like him a little bit. So linebacker 44 for Boise State, pay attention to him. And then the other guy is their wide receiver, Khalil Shakir. He's wide receiver 2. That's his number. But he had almost 65 receptions last year, if I remember. And 63 for 872 and 6 touchdowns. So he, is one of those guys that, tonight's probably going to pop off a little bit and maybe make some impressive catches. So keep tabs on those guys, but for sure, Zach Wilson tonight. And then obviously just earlier in the night, Miami and NC State. We'll see how that one goes. But NC State's so young. They've got some pretty big defensive backs, but I mean, I think Miami's got that one. But tomorrow, even bigger day of football, not just tonight. Michigan, Indiana, obviously the big one that we're all waiting for, Florida, Georgia, and then obviously the night game, Notre Dame and Clemson. But it's not just Notre Dame and Clemson at nighttime. We've got the Pac-12, baby, and the Pac-12 After Dark is back, and it's going to be a fun evening tomorrow with the drinks flowing, the food on the grill, all kinds of stuff. We got some Breeders' Cup for horse racers out there, such as myself, whatever it might be. But I'm looking forward to tomorrow just simply because the Pac-12 is back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we get a pretty good first week of games for them. And I know, sure, their schedule's very limited to 6 games. So you're going to have kind of a marquee matchup every single week. But with Stanford and Oregon's one of the, I would say classic division rivalries or whatever you want to call it. But, there were some years where that was the game that determined really the champion of the league, with USC being a little down among some other teams. But Stanford and Oregon, I think you say two of their better draft prospects are on both teams, 2 apiece, will not be playing this game. Walker Little, the offensive tackle of Stanford, which I really would have liked to see him play this season. I get it from the injury perspective and him just not wanting to risk anything, but not having him play the game in pretty much 2 years, I think would be very difficult from the draft projection standpoint and what kind of potential you see in a guy, because this is an offensive tackle class where it was good coming into the season, and there's been some names that have come off so far in the first handful of games halfway through the season that have definitely made a name for themselves. So Walker Little, I understand the decision, but I think he maybe missed the mark a little bit of sitting out this season. But again, I'm not going to knock him for him or anybody sitting out. Paulson Adebo, the cornerback, he's another guy that had some first-round buzz, maybe more so last year than this year. He's a guy that's opted out this year. And then Oregon, you got Javon Holland, the kind of linebacker hybrid safety as well, is sitting out. And, of course, Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle, who he didn't need to play a season. I think outside of Trevor Lawrence, he's probably the best player in all of college football, especially regarding just the draft 2021 draft class. So those are 4 guys that I think had a lot of potential, just breaking down these teams as a whole. But still, there's some guys left. Johnny Johnson, wide receiver, CJ Verdell, running back. You got Drew Dahlman, the center out of Stanford, and a couple of defenders as well. So still, it's going to be I don't want to say an NFL draft prospect heavy game, but you're still going to see a lot of guys that you need to take notes on. And that game's at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. So we get it in prime time. We don't have to wait till that 9:30 kick.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun night for sure. I'm glad you bring up a guy that I like quite a bit, Johnny Johnson, as well as CJ Verdell. I like both those guys as offensive chess pieces, especially at the next level. I don't know if either one of them would be, the number one starter on their team, but I think that they would certainly have a role at the next level. I'm really curious to how they look after just kind of this long off season and everything that's been going on. But I'm glad the Pac-12 is back and also on the schedule for the Pac-12. And it's really weird. So if you are a West Coast person, get ready for 9:00 football tomorrow. I mean, you're always ready for that because of the games on the East Coast, but also on the West Coast. Arizona State and USC play on Fox at noon. So it's 9:00 in the morning. Very weird. But USC, they lost, maybe their best defensive player in Jay Tufili, who, I mean, his tape was, we've talked about him before in the past. His tape's been just kind of up and down, and you expect more sometimes. At least that's how I felt, but I'm excited for that one just at noon, just because it's going to be a little bit different. But Clemson, Notre Dame, that's probably I would have to say the biggest game, just simply because it's number 1 versus number 4, and Notre Dame's got an opportunity to upset Clemson just simply because we don't have Trevor Lawrence in this game. He's out, but I mean, there is Travis Etienne, there is Amari Rodgers, Jackson Carman. Both of us like him quite a bit. But I mean, Notre Dame, Ian Book finds ways to win games. He's not a great quarterback by any means, but he finds ways to win. Liam Eckenberg, their left tackle, looks really, really good. What's your spin on this game? Do you think Clemson can find a way to get this one out?
I think so, but Notre Dame, they play some really good defense. They're playing controlled and pretty much, I don't say turnover-free football on offense, but Ian Book is just kind of, I hate to always use this tag, but the game manager tag, because last year or years in the past, he's had to do a lot, or he at least chose to do a lot. But he seems a little more comfortable this year. A healthy running game, a healthy defense, and there's a few linebackers in this group that I think you could definitely point out as well. But yeah, I think Notre Dame. I mean, in South Bend, they have an opportunity to play spoiler here, and Clemson, even though, you saw kind of the defense really take a step back in that Boston College game offensively, the true freshman comes in. I'm not going to pronounce his name and mess myself up of trying to say it, but DJ, I'll say it, quarterback. I'll let you do the name pronunciation for him. But no, I think defensively Clemson has some real struggles, and I think this is kind of the first time you're really seeing them get beat kind of at all levels of the field against, a Boston College team last week that offensively they're nothing special. They had to replace a few guys and two across the offensive line and in the backfield with A.J. Dillon, of course. But I don't know if Notre Dame, you can see them, and I know this is an obvious answer, but if you can see them, win the third down battle on both sides of the ball and execute in the red zone, then I definitely think Notre Dame has a shot. But at the end of the day, I don't know. Clemson always seems to find a way to win the games like this. Notre Dame kind of finds a way to lose games like this. They're not very pronounced in top 10 matchups, and you want to say they are, they're pronounced in the negative connotation of that. So definitely a game that you will highlight, though, as far as NFL draft prospects go, but definitely should be a game to watch. Is this – oh, no, this isn't College Game Day because they're at Augusta, aren't they?
I do not know. I never know where they're at unless it's in Michigan somewhere, or I just turn it on Saturday morning and I'm like, oh, they're there. But you're probably right. I mean, but they might be. I mean, it's at Notre Dame. They might be there just simply because of this being the game. But what's the game on? Don't they normally go to the game that's on ABC? Isn't that what they do? They normally go to the game that's on
ABC one. I'm not sure. I guess the ABC one is Stanford, Oregon. So maybe kicking off the Pac-12 season. I'll do some research and find out.
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, but either way, it's going to be a fun day tomorrow with that Clemson game. And, with Clemson too, they've got some veterans up front, KJ Henry, Jordan Williams, Niles Pinckney. And I guess I shouldn't say KJ Henry. He's a redshirt sophomore, but the Miles Murphy kid, he's a freshman. He looks pretty good, but I'm just excited to watch that O-line or that D-line play against the Notre Dame offensive line. Jared Patterson, the center for Notre Dame, like I've already mentioned, Eichenberg at left tackle, but you've got Tommy Kramer, the right guard. You've also got Aaron Banks at left guard. So I'm really interested in this offensive line versus defensive line, that battle of the trenches. It's going to be maybe the difference maker with just some of the veteran leadership that you have from Notre Dame and that experience against more of a younger defensive line. Could that be the determining factor for tomorrow's game? But the other game, and I mean, we could go through obviously every single game if we really wanted to, but the other game is Florida, Georgia. And this is a big one. Simply, they're not playing at Georgia. They're playing actually at Jacksonville, at the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. And Florida, we got, Kyle Trask, we've got Kyle Pitts, we've obviously got Kadarius Toney, who has been really playing some of his best football ever. And I'm super excited for this one. We've talked about Georgia's defense in the past, and I don't think either one of us think, Stetson Bennett is any good, but could he find a way to manage this game for Georgia enough as the number 5 ranked team in the country and get them a win? Is that possible for not really a home game, but a neutral site game?
Yeah, I think it's possible. And I think we're seeing Stetson Bennett kind of come down to earth a little bit. I know this first of the season, he was, not playing outstanding football, but playing good enough. And with the defense and the opponents, he could maybe struggle a little bit and kind of get the rust off himself and then, kind of execute the game plan, go forward. But we're seeing him come down to a very average to below average quarterback now. But again, Florida's defense isn't something to, really hype up. And with the possibility of having Steiner, Davis, and Wilson out in the secondary, all 3 guys are questionable. And I don't know what the suspensions or sitting out ramifications come from that fight with Missouri last weekend, but that may be a factor. So I still think Georgia, has definitely an opportunity. But in this game, one of the bigger stats is Georgia has not allowed a touchdown to a tight end this year. And who comes to play? Kyle Pitts out of Florida, the best tight end in college football. So something has to give there. If Kyle Pitts is limited in this game, I don't think Florida has an opportunity to win. I know that's maybe a very bold prediction, but the guy's the X factor on the offense. He's going to get probably 10 targets at least in this ball game. But if Georgia can find a way to, I don't know who's going to match up on him, but if they can find a way to maybe double team him and just rely on a strong secondary, and I think that's the recipe to beat Florida, especially stop them on offense, because Florida's defense is definitely easy to poke holes in. I think Georgia has the offensive recipe to do that if Bennett can play turnover-free football, or at least limit those in that capacity. But I like Georgia in this game. I think they're better inside in the trenches, and I think defensively that's what wins them this football game.
They are in South Bend tomorrow, by the way, for College Game Day. And
I looked it up. So they're in Augusta next week. So I thought they were going to do it the weekend before the Masters, like this Saturday. So they're going to be live at the Masters doing game day while guys are playing. I don't know how they're able to swing that, but kudos to them. That'll definitely be a cool atmosphere.
That'll be very cool. It'll be very interesting. If I'm a player, if I'm a golfer, I'm a player in that, I would be a little confused by it, I guess I should say, because I don't know, maybe that'd be a little bit of a distraction for me personally, but that's why they get paid millions of dollars and I'm just your crap golfer on a Saturday morning. But I like Florida in this one. I'm going to be honest. Give me an aggressive Dan Mullen coming out at halftime, firing up people in a fist fight with Missouri, who they played last week. Just give me that all day long. And, maybe we'll see that with Georgia this week. I doubt it. But, I just think Florida's got too much firepower on offense with Pitts, Toney, and Trask that, I know their defense isn't very good. I love myself some Zamir White for Georgia. I think he's a very draftable prospect. I love that he's got like this aggressive slicing one-cut style where he's always going downhill. But I'm looking forward to this one. Just overall, because it's after the 12 o'clock games. It's that midday game that I just love to put my feet up after I'm done yelling at Michigan State, who, by the way, beat Michigan. They play Iowa. Not much to focus on for Michigan State outside of Antoine Simmons in this one, but Davion Nixon, the D-tackle out of Iowa. I've watched two of this kid's games, both live games, went back and rewatched one of the YouTube games. I love what I'm seeing from this JUCO transfer. He's 6'3", 305, which is probably why I love him. I always like those undersized defensive tackles that don't really have the length or the weight, so you don't necessarily know where to play him. But Nixon, the way he's looked, the effort, and just the ability with this high effort, quick get off, these fluid hands that he has, and a plethora of it so far looks like pass rush moves. I like what I've seen. He's got 18 tackles, 5.5 for loss, and 2 sacks through 2 games for, I think, a bad Iowa football team. I think he's the best team on the field tomorrow for either team, Michigan State or Iowa, but I'm hoping the Spartans can pull this one out. But I like that one quite a bit. Do you have a 12 o'clock game or another game that you're looking forward to? Obviously, we can talk Auburn. I don't know if Auburn even plays. Do they play tomorrow?
No, Auburn is off. So they're preparing for the greatness of Mississippi State next weekend. So we'll see how that works. But no, I don't know. Maybe Texas and West Virginia face off. I know, West Virginia is nothing to really drool over this year. But North Carolina and Duke, I think that's maybe an underrated fun game, because North Carolina, I know we talked about them a little bit last week, but their offense is so much fun to watch. De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome at wide receiver have been outstanding this year. We know about Sam Howell for next year. At quarterback, he'll be eligible in the 2022 draft, but also, the likes of the running backs, Carter and Williams, have been great as well. But that whole noon time slot, and I know we're talking about guys for this next year's draft, but for 2022's draft, that Arizona State USC game, you got Keaton Slovis, you got Jaden Daniels, and then you got Sam Howell, all in that noon spot. Those are 3 of the top guys you're going to see when we're talking about next year's quarterback crop. So maybe kind of keep your eyes in there a little bit, and then maybe later on you can get more guys for that 2021 class. But I don't know, a lot of players to watch out in that noon hour, but those are just a few that stand out to me.
Well, and another one, too, for the noon game would be Michigan, Indiana, and that's Joe Milton. I don't know if he's necessarily going to go pro after this year. He's got another year left. he could be very well into the mix for next year as well. He's got to get better with his initial read. He did a lot of staring down his first read and not going through progressions. And he really needs to figure out what pace he wants to play at. Does he want to play at the slow Cam Newton pace, or does he need to hurry it up a little bit? And I don't just mean that because Michigan took 5 minutes to score, their last touchdown of the game to make it 27-24. But just throughout that game, there's just so much slow pace from Michigan, and Joe Milton. Is he just not necessarily where he needs to be yet? Is 8 games going to be, or really 9 games going to be enough for evaluators on watching Joe Milton? I don't think so. And I think you need to see another full year. So he could be a guy as well in that noon slot. And really, there's quite a few players in this Michigan-Indiana game. And by the way, everybody, you can go to cover1.net and check out who to watch for in week 10. Thanks to Christian Page, who does a tremendous job every week to, put a guide together of players to watch for all of these games. And the first game he highlights is this game, Michigan-Indiana. So many players. For us Indiana fans that we are right now this year, Wap Filior, Stevie Scott, 2 guys that I like quite a bit. I think that these guys could be the difference maker for Indiana to get this win.
Man, if Indiana is able to seal this, that would be incredible. I mean, they'll have all the attention. They've had it the past couple weeks, but they'll have all the attention with this game being in that primetime spot in the afternoon. So Indiana, they got the players, but a Michigan team that is, I can never put my finger on under the Jim Harbaugh area. Are they a good Are they a good football team? I don't know. They look good week 1, but then Minnesota doesn't seem like they're a well put together team at this moment. They did not look great in week 2. Michigan State, they lose to Rutgers week 1. They come back and beat Michigan in week 2. So Michigan, I don't know. Maybe this is the game where we figure them out. We know Indiana is a pretty good football team. Michigan still don't know. But Indiana, you get another win here, the expectations are through the roof. I'm not saying they're going to go and beat Ohio State in a championship game setting or whatever it may be. But Indiana, I mean, this is the year. It's an odd year. Why not make 2020 just even weirder and go put yourself in Big Ten championship conversation?
Couldn't agree more. I think, Minnesota is definitely not as good what they're supposed to be. And Indiana is looking like a legit team. Obviously, they got to finish this one off. This is one of those games like where it feels like, hey, Indiana could pull one out, and then they don't do it. But Michigan, they're just interesting. I mean, like I mentioned, Joe Milton, what kind of player are they going to get out of him as a passer? And then aside from that, I mean, what is this defense going to do? Can they make these adjustments during the game? They didn't do it against Michigan State last week. And, you've got talented players, Kwity Paye, Aiden Hutchinson, Carlo Kemp, all on your defensive line. You've got Cameron McGrone, who got hurt last week. I think that was a difference maker for their front 7. Is he going to be 100%? If not, it'll be interesting. And then obviously at right tackle, Jalen Mayfield, maybe one of my favorite players I've watched over the last few weeks, who I think is, one of those guys that when you look at his body type, and I do not mean this as like, oh, this is who he is. When I look at like just the body type and like just the overall frame of a player, I see like a Jedrick Wills, but then you see like the footwork and just the overall ability, and it's not the same player. But I think that there's a lot of potential for Jalen Mayfield to move up draft boards and potentially be that second offensive tackle that we all love to talk about and really be in that top 3 offensive tackle grouping, because I think Penei Sewell, like we've all said, is the top player possibly in the country, not named Trevor Lawrence, and is without a doubt the best offensive tackle in this class. So Mayfield's a guy, though, that could very well be in that top 25 range by the time we get to the end of the season. But he's got a tough task against Indiana this week. He's got to be as consistent as he's been these last, 2 weeks against Minnesota and against Michigan State. But I like him quite a bit. And I do like Indiana in this game to win and just really add more pressure to this Harbaugh era. But we'll see what happens. That's all I have as far as the overall games. I mean, those are really the players that I'm paying attention to. I mean, obviously we could sprinkle in, a little bit of, Wallace from Oklahoma State, or, Brock Purdy, Iowa State, Baylor. Brock Purdy has not looked like the quarterback I thought he was going to be going into this year. I think I curse quarterbacks. I'm going to be honest. I think I curse them.
Maybe so. So we'll be really like Trevor Lawrence. So if he fails, then you're the reason, I guess, that he's not, that he doesn't succeed. But piggybacking off what you said about Mayfield, then we'll get to the next topic here. But I know there were some questions about his strength coming into the year. I didn't necessarily jump on board with that because maybe it was just more consistency and just his leverage of, really pronouncing that strength. But I know in the clip you showed in your article, and then there was a big run that they had week 1 as well in that Minnesota game, where he just plows through everybody. I mean, once he gets that anchor and once he gets that correct positioning, good luck moving this guy, because like you wrote in there, he has that grip strength and those heavy hands to really just do whatever he wants to with his matchup. So I'm with you. He kind of does have a similar body type and to some similar strengths as far as Jedrick Wills does. But like you said, the overall package, no, they're night and day different players. But I'm with you as far as some of that. He's cleaned up some of that technique as far as his hands goes. And I think I've always said, and we both said, hand placement is one of those critical attributes when you're scouting offensive linemen, because if you get your hands in the right position, I think the rest of your body naturally goes into a position where you can anchor and where you can really leverage out your power and strength. And it seems like Mayfield has definitely corrected some of his craft from a year ago. And I think he's one of those guys too, like you said, is definitely rising his stocks. And when we were talking about that Stanford-Oregon matchup, I circled Walker Little as a guy that, I wish he was playing this year, because guys like Mayfield are taking advantage of some of those guys, opting out in the season and making a name for himself. So Mayfield has definitely caught my attention so far this year, and some of the slight improvements that you've seen in just a couple games so far.
He'll definitely fall into that mix with Dylan Ray-Duns of North Dakota State, of who could be, again, that next offensive tackle. And I think with another season of tape, it might do Mayfield some favors. And I mean, he's the only starter back on an offensive line that lost 4 starters to the draft this past year. And he, without question, in my opinion, the best player on that offense. No offense to Joe Milton or anybody else there, but I think he's the best player on that offense. So I like him quite a bit, and I'm with you on all that. So that's the preview for the weekend of college football and all that good stuff. Let's jump into just a fun little topic to close us out today, the mid-season rookie report. Some of the top rookies that have played so far from the 2020 NFL draft. I'll let you start this one off because this was your topic, and I'm super excited to talk about it because I think there's been some really impressive play from rookies all over. But who's been a guy that's really caught your attention?
Yeah, absolutely. This rookie class is so much fun because I think they're just, especially on offensive side of the ball, there's so much like versatility and firepower. And I think some of the guys you've seen step up, maybe not that we didn't expect it, but maybe just not in in year 1. And a guy like Chase Claypool, of how he's been implemented to this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, not just catching the football, but also getting some of those jet sweeps and just being an incredible asset for an offense that actually needed some more firepower. And that's really odd to say because you never know the health of James Conner, or Juju Smith-Schuster is kind of up and down now, and he'll enter some contract negotiations and potential trade opportunities there. But Claypool could be that number 1 offensive threat in Pittsburgh in just a couple years to come. And he's definitely righting the ship and showing what he's capable of. But one guy that's really stood out to me, it's no surprise, Justin Jefferson out of Minnesota. He's been incredible this year. He's filled in that void that Stephon Diggs left coming over to Buffalo. But the guy's been outstanding. He really showcased his potential against the Tennessee Titans, and I guess it was week 2, week 3, just scorching that secondary. The Titans secondary is nothing to really praise highly about, but still he showed his ability to win at all levels of the field and really kind of show that vertical ability that he showed with Joe Burrow at LSU. So Justin Jefferson, deep parts of the field, being that consistent and really kind of turning into a number 1 target for Kirk Cousins in that Minnesota Vikings team. Thielen is kind of, his health status is always kind of questionable going into the weekend. Justin Jefferson, even though it was expected, given the situation and just his overall ability and potential, he's definitely caught my eye in a positive way.
I like the Justin Jefferson pick for Minnesota. I'm a little jealous, obviously, but staying down the train of Justins here, I'm going to take the layup. Justin Herbert, without question, for the Chargers, has been so impressive. I had my question marks, my doubts a little bit about him coming out of Oregon to succeed right away. That doesn't mean I didn't like him. He was my 24th overall player, but for what he's done so far, yeah, he's 1-5 as a starter. Don't really care about that. He's got 15 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, almost 2,000 yards passing. He's completing 67% of his passes. He looks like the real deal. And with a little bit more time, with a little bit more experience, he's not going to be Daniel Jones. He's going to be better than Daniel Jones. And I know I say that because there's Giants fans out there that do believe that Daniel Jones is still the answer, and that includes Dave Gettleman, but that's only because that's his job. And I'll get in on that on Scenario Sunday, Sunday morning when I talk about Daniel Jones and the Giants. But Herbert at 1-5 as a starter. I like, it's not even about the statistics. You just watch the games and you look back at some of his plays, his throws against teams like Jacksonville and Tampa Bay and Carolina. He puts some throws on the money, and he has looked very impressive so far this season. And obviously having a player like Keenan Allen is helping with his development. Having a player like Mike Williams to throw jump balls up to is really key. And another guy that's really been key with jump ball situations for a young quarterback, that's obviously for Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, that's T. Higgins. This guy's got 53 targets with 33 receptions for almost 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has really taken over, not Tyler Boyd as the number 1 receiver, but that number 2 receiver spot has really become his, and Tyler Boyd has become the true number 1 receiver in that offense. But T. Higgins at 33 overall this past year, surprising a little bit that he fell to that spot, but he has been a home run and instant chemistry with Joe Burrow. So I like Herbert and Higgins quite a bit for what we've seen so far through these 7-8 weeks of the football season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about T. Higgins potentially, kind of falling in the draft last year, but with such a heavy, talented wide receiver class, you expected some guys to fall and us to be talking about him in this season, be like, how did this guy last to pick, XYZ? But we knew it was going to take place. Probably going to happen again in the 2021 draft as well, because the wide receiver grouping is very strong, similar to what we saw this past year, and won't be surprised one bit if we're talking about a handful of rookie wide receivers next year at this time, making a significant impact. But speaking of significant impacts, Tristan Wirfs, the offensive tackle for Tampa Bay, has been outstanding this year.
Outstanding.
Fortunately, with Tom Brady coming over, we get Tampa Bay in a lot of primetime games. And so we've had the opportunity to watch Wirfs, and regardless of being one of the top rookies, let's just talk about him being one of the best offensive linemen in all of the NFL this year. The guy has just been so clean in his pass sets. What kind of capabilities he brings in the run game, where he can literally just pancake anybody in his way. He moves so well. He's just such a clean overall prospect. And it does not come as any surprise whatsoever. But the guy looks, and I don't mean this to sound like an over-exaggeration, but the guy looks like an all-pro tackle at this moment. And I think the sky's the limit for this guy. So it doesn't come as a surprise whatsoever. The run game has definitely taken off for Tampa Bay this year. Tom Brady seems a lot comfortable in that pocket as well. And Tristan Wirfs picks up so many stunts, so many blitzes. His footwork is so clean. I don't want to sit here and over exaggerate and be like, hey, this guy is the prototypical guy that you want. But I'm sorry for other contemporaries as rookie offensive tackles. Like, the bar is set. Good luck of defending, your status. But Tristan Wirfs has been outstanding, and another Big Ten offensive lineman at the tackle position that has come in and definitely helped their team succeed so far. But one more guy, and then we can get your last parting thoughts on this, and we can get out of here. But I may speak on behalf of both of us, but Jalen Johnson, Chicago Bears, has been great this year. Sure, he gets some penalties, but we knew that was coming because that's what he did at Utah. But if you have to limit his physicality to limit the penalties, then sorry, that's not the player you're going to get. But Jalen Johnson, he's been really good in press situations. He plays off the ball a little bit, and that's where you'll see some of his weaknesses. But the guy has been great, and I can't wait to see him continue his success, because just his ability to jam off the line of scrimmage in press situations, just to kind of have that clutch factor as well. Jalen Johnson and a handful of other corners have been pretty good so far in this class. Trayvon Diggs from Alabama for the Cowboys, the lone bright spot maybe in that Cowboys secondary or overall defense. or heck, even team. I'll go that far. And I don't know. You can give me your thoughts on Jeff Okudah, how he's been coming along, but I think Diggs and Jalen Johnson have been two of the bright spots in that cornerback class.
Yeah, I'll talk briefly on Jeff Okudah. It's been a little bit up and down, and I love Jalen Johnson. I mean, he had a top 25 grade on him, and I feel like he's looked so good for a defense that I think really needed a player like him. And I know he doesn't have an interception yet, but he's looked really good. Jeff Okudah, up and down, no doubt about it. He struggled in his first game, and he struggled at certain parts throughout the year, but he does have an interception. He only has 2 pass deflections, but I think what he's struggling with is those wide receivers that hit those double moves, and he just finds himself. And I said this last year on the show. I know I said it. We talked about it with Christian Fulton and Jeff Okudah. They're moving a little bit more into this zone defense so they can free up some blitzes. And the guy that kind of gets caught on his own island, stranded in the middle of nowhere, is Jeff Okudah. And it's showing, and it showed at Ohio State. And I know I said that on this show. And that worries me. And it always worried me about taking him top 5. I didn't see a top 5 player. I didn't see a top 3 player. I thought he was closer to 9, 10, 11 on the board rather than number 3. And will he get better? Hopefully. Odds are this is going to be a coaching change this year. So will a new defensive coordinator and a new head coach be able to develop him? I hope so, but I don't know. I mean, at number 3 overall, it's been just it's kind of been shaky. And when you had a need at defensive line and there's a player like Derek Brown available who's been starting to really put it together for the Carolina Panthers, it really makes you wonder, is there any way that they messed this one up? But a couple other guys for me, Patrick Queen out of Baltimore, the way he just fell in the draft was really weird. I know there was some I don't want to say inconsistent tape, but maybe not just that starting ability consistently throughout his career. He kind of came on strong near the end there and really put it all together for LSU. But I mean, just the athletic ability was, I think, enough to justify taking him, but he fell in the draft perfectly to Baltimore, and he's done a tremendous job so far this year. He's got 48 total tackles, 5 quarterback hits, 2 sacks. He's already got a touchdown, a forced fumble or 2. So, I mean, he's looked like the part for the traditional Baltimore Ravens linebacker. And then, my top safety last year, I think possibly yours as well, was Antoine Winfield Jr. out of Minnesota. He goes to Tampa, and just the rangy defender that he is, it's showing up. I mean, he looks like he's been in the league 4 or 5 years at this point. Playing safety's not easy. Having an impact at that position is not easy to do, but he's been able to do it, being the 45th overall pick of the draft. And with 44 tackles, 4 or 5 pass deflections, 2 sacks. He had a key play Monday night against the Giants on that 2-point conversion. Some would say it's pass interference. Maybe he got there a little early, but fact of the matter is he got there. And it's one of those things, is he's got that range, he's got that ability, and he plays like a veteran. So I've really liked what I've seen out of a lot of rookies. I could keep going. Another one, and I'll end on this just simply because this was our boy, one of our boys, and that's Damian Lewis out of LSU. I mean, we spoke about it constantly. He's a plug-and-play interior offensive lineman, and he's gone to Seattle and he's played on that interior offensive line for them, and he's been so consistent. I think he started every single game outside of maybe one game for them, and he is definitely, without question, looked like a really solid find for them in the 3rd round of the draft. And I mean, it was to be expected to see him be that late day 2 pick somewhere, but for them to get him and for him to have that success, it just goes to show that good football teams find the good players, and that's exactly what they did. But yeah, I mean, so many good players. I think we really hit the nail on the head with so many of these guys, and especially with our college football preview for the weekend. But do you have anything else to add for me, my man?
I don't think so. We covered a lot there. So, no, I'm good.
Yeah, no, we definitely did, and we do every week. And if you guys want to stay up on top of it, the best thing to do is find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker. Again, wherever you get your podcast, search Cover One NFL Draft Podcast. Subscribe to it. rate, review. The more ratings we get, the more reviews we get, the more podcasts we can do. So be sure to give us a listen and give us a shout anytime you have questions for the draft. And you can do that, of course, on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. That's for me, at _Christian Page. That's for CP. CP, my man, I appreciate it as always on a Friday. You guys have a great weekend. I'll talk to everybody on Sunday for Scenario Sunday, where I rant about Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. But until next week, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.